it's not that I was teaching critical thinking.
When did Elon Musk send it out and how?
That's when it blew up.
Why do you think you were fired?
I was called into the office. This is my opinion. And they're going to be watching this. They're going to pour over every word. And I had a coworker. He was my best friend at that school. When he left, I thought, was he recording me?
Warren, thank you so much for joining me today. You're the first guest on my podcast. That's pretty big for me. Pretty
big for
cool.
Me.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to jump right into it. I think your story is really interesting and also kind of important right now in terms of teachers and how much we undervalue them. And then also, it's so interesting what's happened with you very recently in your story. But before we get to that, I was wondering if you could walk us through what initially put you on the world stage.
A video of me teaching went viral. And
just teaching. It wasn't like you threw a kid out a window or something like we've also seen.
Kid out of a window. No, that would have probably been more interesting, but I did not. No, it was just, a conversation about J.K. Rowling.
And what were the details of that conversation?
We were recording a newscast, and he was supposed to be the anchor on camera, and he was kind of feeling a little bit nervous. I said, let's just have a casual warm up, and I'll sit on camera and kind of show it's like nothing to be scared of, and just kind of lead by example. And I often, because I teach content creation, is what I teach students to do. So we often do podcasts. And
what grade is this?
This is high school.
Okay.
So I said, well, what's something that interests you? And what would be something you would like to ask? He said, I'd like to ask you about J.K. Rowling or Harry Potter is what I think he said. Your thoughts on Harry Potter. I said, all right, we hit record. All right, so these guys want to talk about, or I guess it was J.K. Rowling. You guys want to talk about J.K. Rowling. So what's up? And he said, so how have your views on Harry Potter changed given J.K. Rowling's transphobia? And within there is a presupposition that first we need to start with, okay, well, you're kind of baking in an accusation within the question, which people often do.
So to answer it would almost be accepting the accusation.
Correct. You first have to address what needs to be contended with. And that is that a fair characterization? Okay, so let's start with, is J.K. Rowling transphobic or a bigot or whatever it was, bigoted opinions, I think was the phrase he used. So what are you basing that on? These tweets. Okay, let's take a look at those tweets. Sure, finds the tweets. That was the one cut because it took a minute to find the tweets. Then I had never even seen the tweets, so I wasn't sure what I was reacting to. I was just going to react to whatever was presented, which I think is a key element to critical thinking. And he read the tweets and just reassessed them. And he came to the realization that it probably, we did not discover sufficient evidence within that interaction to make that a fair accusation. And then he acknowledged that, which he's a good guy, and shows a lack of ego that is essential in these conversations, I think. I used to say emotion is the death of reason, but I think it's really ego, because ego is often a result of emotion. I think it's more ego, or if you could, because we can't help emotion often.
Yes, we get ruled by the passions, that sort of thing.
Well, also like a survival mechanism, or if an ex-girlfriend walks into a bar, you're going to feel an emotion. You can't help that. Now, what you do with the emotion, you can. But that emotion, it happens within a split second. It's just going to happen. But being able to, I think there's two parts of our minds. In Japanese philosophy, they talk about this often. It's like the observer, where if I see a stick lying on the ground, I see the stick. But then there's another layer. There's the observer that says, okay, that stick it's wet. It's covered in moisture. Oh, it's a short stick. It's a brown stick. But it adds different value to it. That's the part. So if we can separate the emotion from the part of us that can observe the emotion, oh, I'm feeling this right now, I can put that in check. I can control that. It doesn't have to control me.
That's really hard to do sometimes, though. And I think part of it comes from I don't know if panic's the right word, but a feeling that you need to act because things might change or get worse in a situation. Like per your example with seeing the girlfriend or the ex-girlfriend, you might think, oh, I need to address her, or maybe or I'm ignoring her, or did we make eye contact? And then there's all these thoughts of like, well, I need to act now, when it could just be, I need to wait and think about it for a second.
Yes. And it's fascinating as well, because so much of that happens without communication. So much communication is nonverbal. We've all heard that expression, but it's so true. And I've been playing with this idea. I'd love to run this by you, because when I'm teaching film directors or to work with actors, especially screenwriters as well. This is really helpful with screenwriting, especially if you're going to work with actors though. I draw on a whiteboard, a real simple drawing of an ocean, and then little boats floating on the surface of the ocean. And I label the boats as words. Each boat is a word. And then beneath the surface, I write subtext, circle that. Because so when you're talking to an actor, what does an actor care about? They have the words on the page. That's the script. You hand it to them. Those are just the words, though. What the actor, they memorize those words, but that's not acting. Acting is everything else. It's everything beneath the surface. Because the words are just the tools that we're using to communicate everything that is intangible. That we're trying to formulate. It's like mathematics. Like 2 symbolizes something. It has meaning and that allows us to articulate something we would not otherwise be able to articulate. So an actor wants to know, okay, what do I want in this scene? What's my motivation? And how do I feel about this person? Because that's going to affect their behavior, and that's acting. It's not so much the words, but how you say the words as well. And that all comes from subtext. And so good directors will go through the script and study it from the perspective of subtext, because it all comes from there. And, they call that even doing like the subtext work. So anyway, but I think there is something there that correlates to critical thinking and logic and these kind of interactions as well. And
that's
being
interesting. When I was in film school, I had to take one acting class. I went for like screenwriting and directing and stuff, but we had to take one acting class. And the way you described that reminded me of one exercise we did where you would be partnered with somebody and you would just have to say the same phrase over and over to each other. And then I remember there were these 2 students who kind of quieted the room because we would take turns doing it in front of the class. And they had to say, I love you over and over again. But the students, we all knew, hated each other. And yet and all of that subtext kind of funneled through. And it was just weird to watch it because everyone became kind of like quiet and kind of unsettled by it. And then even the teacher was like, damn, there was something there.
Yeah.
But so I want to go back to the timeline before we get into too much of the conceptual discussion. So we have this initial clip, and you said that was a class that was for creating internet videos, like for content creation.
I don't even know if it was a class. We were creating a broadcast for the school, and they were like, hey, I was asked to create a broadcast with these. I think there was another student in the room.
Like for the announcements.
Yeah, basically. Hey, this weekend, school news, this field trip happened, this person, they won the basketball game or whatever. That's all it was, And I mean, I do a variety of kind of projects in the class, all kinds of stuff, but that's what that one was.
Okay. And I guess that makes sense why you were filming it. So the student was supposed to be on camera, and you said he was feeling comfortable, so you were on camera. So how did that get out? How did it? Do you guys post these somewhere?
I had been inspired years earlier by Jordan Peterson when he was recording his lectures. I thought that's really cool. That's really smart. And I think he's absolutely right that this technology has so much potential to where you film one lecture. Now you can share that with who knows how many people can gain value from it. Not that my lectures had that much value or that many people were watching them, but it was a cool idea. And so I had been doing that for a while when I was able to, and I thought it was worth it. And I hadn't really done that in a while. I kind of veered off more into narrative work, and I've been dabbling with different things on YouTube, but I just thought this was an interesting interaction. So I uploaded it to that channel, that like teaching portfolio portion of the channel. Um, and days went by. I really didn't think it was that interesting, to be honest.
And this is the clip that was on your main YouTube channel.
Yes,
Okay.
it's the same video that video. That's how it got up. I uploaded it, and then someone else, Lee Harris, I guess, it started getting some views. When it went crazy, it had gotten like 13,000 views. I was like, whoa, that's a lot for me. That's interesting.
How many subscribers did you have at the time?
I had posted a feature film I made, and that got me like 3,000, but that's the only time I've ever really gotten subscribers.
Yeah, so 15,000 views with 3,000 subs is great.
Yeah.
So then how did it pop off from there?
Because Lee Harris must have downloaded it and posted it to X, Twitter. And I hadn't been active on Twitter in 4 years. Right. So then when it did blow up, I couldn't even remember my login password to like respond to it or anything. It took me like 3 hours not that long. It took me like an hour to reset everything.
Okay. So Lee Harris posts it on Twitter. Now you're on Twitter, you're seeing it blow up. When did Elon Musk send it out, and how?
That's when it blew up.
That was like,
I don't know. I didn't know about it until after he posted it. So
okay.
I don't know exactly when Lee posted it, how many people saw it before that. Because someone texted me and said Elon Musk just tweeted a video of you. And I thought, and then, yeah.
So it was disbelief.
Yeah. I mean, I thought, I don't know what that means. It was more like that. I'm not that familiar with X and Twitter at the time. I wasn't that familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very Petersonian to not know what that means either, to have that reaction.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then what changed in that moment? Like, cause you said you had someone text you, did you start getting a lot of communication from all over? Like, was it easy to ignore?
Did I start getting communication? Not on that day. That was a Sunday. I remember it vividly. My brother texted me that he had, or did my girlfriend, one of them texted me that. Those are the only two people. No, it's not like people started texting me.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm trying to...
no one knew who I was. No one knew who the teacher in the video was.
Oh, I see. So it was uncredited post.
Yeah, it was uncredited.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm wondering, when did you start getting any kind of backlash? Because I know that came along with it too, which is why this became such a big thing in kind of the culture wars for what it's worth.
For me, it was at work the next day, and I just went in and wasn't going to say anything and try and just, because I was a little nervous about it. I mean, I had been posting stuff like for years, and no one had ever. I didn't think it was against the policy or anything, but it's an interesting dynamic where I work. So you never know. They do have the ability to hire and fire at any time for any reason. It's not like a normal, like most schools. So yeah, I was a little nervous, but it was it's so surreal. You're kind of like, the positivity of it kind of outweighs yes, it's a risk and it's scary, but it felt positive. People were saying good things as far as I could tell. And so I think that added a lot. Had people been saying only bad things, who knows what would have happened. And
well, just watching the clip, I can't say there's any bad in there. It was just a critical thinking exercise. But I guess it's just that the same presupposition the kid brought into it that you kind of helped walk through. Did you see any of that on the internet? Of just people basically just attacking you for, almost seemingly defending J.K. Rowling against the woke mob that she's up against.
Some of the other teachers, not directly to my face, then it was very interesting how almost no one says anything directly to you, but you catch wind of it. There's people that disagree with saying the characterization of it, but I thought I had not really interjected any opinion into it. But I mean, do
you think that line is particularly blurred these days? It's sort of like to throw a really weird example out there. A lot of people can't give Hitler credit for painting because of all the horrible things he did. And I think you can separate those and go, I mean, he was a mediocre painter. he could paint a building better than I could paint anything. But so many people are so quick to say he's a terrible painter. I hate that guy. It's like, well, you can hate him, but does that translate? And I wonder if that's where a lot of this comes from. If you were getting any flack, it's like, well, we don't like J.K. Rowling right now because of her opinions on gender and sex and female spaces. So we can't give her the books that we all already love.
Yeah, I'm sure that's out there. I don't see any reason to claim J.K. Rowling has done anything really wrong. As far as I can see, I don't think she has. So for me, I wasn't really paying attention to that stuff. That kind of came later when I was trying to taking for what's the next step going to be. Oh, and people were leaving comments saying, you should check out this Contrapoints video. This is the video that really will prove you wrong. So I said, all right, don't know what to do for the next video. So that could be one of the next ones. And so I did. And that kind of kicked up. That was the first real, I would say, resemblance of the mob.
I'm aware of Contrapoints. I believe she's even covered Jordan Peterson before. What was it she said about you or your take or situation?
She didn't say anything about me. People in the comments were saying, go watch this video.
Oh, about J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, she had.
I see.
There were hours. There's multiple videos on J.K. Rowling, and they're 3 hours long, 2 hours. They're just, and that's when I realized once I started watching it, I thought this is so long, and there's so much. For such a long video, there's so little actually said that you have to sift through, and in a way, that's a frequent tactic that I see. They just throw so much into the video. It makes people perceive value and intelligence, and it also makes it harder to dissect the nonsense. But I did my best in like a 15-minute. There's a few tactics that I just kind of pointed out. I could have done a lot better, and it just got so long. I was just like, this is just too much to cover. But yeah, it was the most common tactic Contrapoints employs is, well, it's just so obvious that I'm not even going to discuss this anymore. And anyone who believes in trans rights obviously just knows inherently that J.K. Rowling is transphobic. So there's really no evidence needed.
Yeah, I see a lot of YouTubers do that now, actually. Also in the political sphere, I see a lot of YouTubers in a similar sense speak that like, well, I know you know this about so-and-so, and I know that people who are on this side of the camp know these things, but they just say that everyone knows it instead of saying the thing that needs to be debunked.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as a quick asterisk, I did have the slight realization in your response that my example with Hitler, well, Hitler actually did do something horrible.
Right, that's
and I would agree with you that J.K. Rowling did not. Okay, fair enough. I'm learning too. Okay, so then it's been 4 months since the initial clip went out.
Oh,
a little longer now.
I'd say 5 months, 6 months.
Man, time flies.
Yeah.
How has it flown? What's it been like since then?
Well, it was an interesting thing when something like that happens because it's such a strange, just doesn't make sense. And my first reaction was just taken aback. And the second reaction is, why? Really? Like this is worth going viral? I'm not complaining, but it's just like, it's kind of, and Brett Cooper said it really well. It's kind of sad that this is worthy of going viral.
Teacher teaches. Yeah.
Then you're faced with this choice. What do you do next? Do you completely step away? Or do you have a remarkable opportunity handed to you? I don't think ambition should be discouraged. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think you almost have a responsibility to do the most with what is given to you, with remarkable opportunities, not just for yourself, but for those, your family and those that depend on you. And if I remember feeling, if I can turn this into something, it's worth giving it my all and trying. And I'm going to have to try and balance both, and it's going to be challenging. So then I had to set about figuring out, what am I going to do? How am I going to do that? What comes next? And that's where things like Contrapoints and I had a coworker one teacher who I had been making narrative films. He was my best friend at that school. And he was very good with camera as well and audio. So between the two of us, we set up a recording space in my house where the bookshelves are in those videos. We used all of our own personal equipment to set up the space. And we started trying to record a video once a week, usually on Friday after school.
And this was the man who was off camera. Mm-hmm. So you were having conversations with him.
Yeah, that everybody thinks is scripted because no one could possibly actually believe the things he says is what people seem to think. Like Warren's just scripting all this to make himself look good. Or I thought,
yeah, a literal straw man.
That's kind of flattering. You think that video has so much value, it must be scripted like that. If I were to script something, the end result would be that, really? Like if I was going to artificially create a narrative, like that wouldn't be the end result. I would make something much more exciting, it seems like, than that. But anyways, so it was just dabbling and kind of finding my footing, and it kind of hit my stride, I would say, about 2.5 months ago, 2 months ago, those last few videos, when I started kind of thinking more, I realized like it's the logic that's interesting. So I need to find something that I feel like it can't just be an opinion, because no one cares about another guy with an opinion. It has to be being able to use logic, almost like mathematics, to illustrate these patterns and navigate these things. And so I think one of the first successful ones was Elon Musk's interview with Don Lemon about, if you raise standards, well, do you have any evidence to indicate that raising standards will cause harm? Which is just logically, the logic is the evidence in that case. And that was the approach. That was the angle of that video. And so I started to hit my stride with that. And I would, over the course of the week, like Monday or Tuesday, I would try and find a topic, and then I would map it out. But all of this was because I felt one viral video is not enough. I was just a teacher, not to build anything, not if I was going to try and make the most of this. It's just like getting lucky in a freak accident. That doesn't mean I have value or I can add anything. Doesn't mean I can have a YouTube channel. There's so much more work to do than that. You have to earn it. I think because the audience can feel if you've done the work or if you actually have something to add, and you can't fake that. I don't think. I think the audience can sense it. And I've just spent these past 5 months, almost 6 months, 5 months, I have spent really trying to get to the bottom of these questions, the questions that everyone would ask on a podcast or an interview. Why did the video go viral? Why isn't critical thinking being taught? Is it being taught? What are the flaws in the education system? And these are deep questions that require, and I would do my best to answer them. I would bubble my way through, and I would always feel like, oh, I can do better. I can do better. And I would think about it more, and over the course of the next week, and then somehow I would get another chance to sit down with someone and take another stab at it, and it might be a little bit better. And then
I get, to an extent though, you're proof that somebody is teaching or was teaching critical thinking in those grades. Would you say that you were an enigma, or is it something that was at your school?
I can only speak to what I've seen myself, so I don't know what other teachers are doing when I'm not around. So it would be irresponsible for me to say, "Oh, it's not being taught at all." And it's not that I was teaching critical thinking. It's more just that critical thinking is just essential. Logic is essential when you're communicating with students, especially at that age, because they can sniff out nonsense. And if you can't back up what you're saying, they don't care about your opinions. It was just out of necessity. And it's just how I've come to see the most effective forms of communication with my own family and friends who disagree. It's just, it started out not as a conscious, I'm teaching critical thinking. In the same way when I was just kind of describing the boats on the surface and how all these things do correlate together. So when I'm teaching filmmaking, there's a lot of, here's the traditional production model. We're going to study the traditional model so that we know what to strip away, what is nonsense. This is why they say you have to do it. Well, this is what they say you have to do. Let's ask the question, why, and see what we can actually get rid of. Where is this ludicrous amount of spending, wasteful spending that causes budgets to go so high? That's critical thinking. So it takes many forms.
Then I'm not really sure if schools are doing a lot of it. I remember when I was in high school, they sold our baseball diamond. So they sold off a big chunk of our land and our ability to do sports. And then they upgraded all of the whiteboards to be those Promethean boards, the ones that are like electronic and you can draw on. And I can't see how that was at any point. They were like $5,000 a piece and they had to sell our land for it. And they are a whiteboard that can play videos.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And I would encounter things like that all the time at my school. And
really?
Yeah, I believe to this day that my ability to think critically and is what has allowed me to navigate one of the most challenging times of my life, which has been these past few weeks, and hopefully I can make it out of the other side. It's not over, but even beyond that, before I even lost my job, the months since that video, things got weird. There was a lot to navigate. And even before that, though, there's always office politics, workplace politics. People are trying to take each other out in various ways. And when you can
even at a school, there's teacher rivalry.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. It's more than just, and they're not thinking of themselves as teachers. It's the exact same as any other workplace where there's those with power who are exerting control over others. It's still a business. It's not like, they're teachers, so they're somehow, at some schools perhaps, probably, but not this one. Not what I saw. So being able to navigate those patterns and to be able to try and figure out what are their motivations, what are they going to do next, anticipate the next moves. I mean, these are life skills that I think are absolutely essential.
Well, you mentioned a very important point in your story, which is that you were fired. That was in the last couple of weeks. That was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were fired?
Well, I can only say what was articulated to me on the day. I was called into the office, and because there's multiple, I had expanded my program to be able to work with the entire building. So I worked with two different sets of leadership. One set of leadership, on paper, I worked for them, which was illogical. And I was making that case before that and trying to move over to the other set because over 95% of my students, if not 98%, were with this other set of leadership. So it made absolutely no sense. Just because when I was first hired, I came in on paper under them.
I'm a little confused, but there's different administrations?
Yes, it's just workplace logistics. The point is that there was a subset of a handful of tightly knit people. There's kind of factions at the school. Often it feels like, it often felt like the teachers were more high school cliquey than the students. Okay. And I really mean that. It was these really, my first 2 years, there were two warring factions to the point where the principal and the assistant principal that hired me were on one of the sides, and there was a coup. As far as I can tell, like no one will admit exactly what happened or say what happened, but they were both fired on the same day. And no one will say the official reason, but if you can think critically and use logic, it's pretty obvious what happened. And a new principal and assistant principal ascended in power and took their place. And those two did, especially the assistant one to him, did not. We seem to disagree on certain things logically often.
So you were hired by this first set. They get fired in this coup.
Out in a coup. I would describe, this is my opinion. So, and they're going to be watching this. They're going to pour over every word. This is my opinion. I don't know the real reason. From my observations, that is what I think the logic indicates.
Okay. And then how long were you working under the new regime?
2 years. The last 2 years.
And then obviously that includes the last 4 months, 5 months.
Yes. So when I walked in that room, they said, yeah, you have a meeting with the head. There's one person who makes the choices. And she's not even in the building. She's in another building. She used to kind of have an office and be around a little bit, but she's just a business person looking at things from a business angle and optics. And that's fine. You need that. Anyways, so it had to come from her. And initially her and her lawyers had met with me after the Piers Morgan. I went on Piers Morgan. They realized this has gotten to a point where people are going to probably reach out, and we got to address this. Is there anything wrong so they said, no, there's nothing. This is my memory of it. They would probably disagree, but they said there were no rules broken here. Student didn't appear on camera. He signed the audio release, the video release. We've used content with him before. We asked him to even be on a broadcast, and you came across good in the video. The feedback was positive. I was thinking, if the feedback had been negative, but yes, they have a subjective. There's a clause even in the handbook that says if you say something politically on social media that they deem bad, they can use that to fire you. You can be fired.
Is it more or less a morality clause?
I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what a morality clause is.
I just hear people get fired for that a lot in similar stories. I wouldn't know the legalese myself, but then to strip it back from that, go ahead.
A private business shouldn't be forced to pay someone they don't want to pay. That's how I view it. And so I don't think the school did anything illegal or I think they have the right to separate and depart ways. I don't have an issue with that at all.
Though it sends a weird message to broadcasting students to fire the teacher in broadcasting after he succeeds at being broadcasted.
Anyways, I walked in the room, and those the three that ascended in power who had been making my life difficult, I would say, for the past several months, seemed excited. And they said, we don't trust you you uploaded a video of a student. I uploaded a video of an almost identical interaction, which is why I thought it was worth sharing, because it happened in the exact same way. The student made the claim that J.K. Rowling was racist. I have probably 2 hours of podcasts recorded with students. Students often record. I teach content creation. We often record podcasts. This was one of those. This was another 5-minute clip, and I had posted it. I even told the other teacher I had been building the channels, because we'd been debating what are the parameters? Should we post this? Should we not? I had posted something at one point, and he was like, "You should probably take that down." I was like, "Yeah," and it's not even that good a quality. I had put it on Twitter to test it, and anyways, deleted that. So we'd been going back and forth. I told him, I was like, I checked with his parents, got his parents' permission, so I'm going to share this one. He didn't say a word. 8 days go by, and now they're calling me in the office. Yeah, and they said, there was that one sentence email that went out 4 months ago, and it said to check with your supervising principal if you're going to upload online. And I had just done the exact same thing I had done before. I even took an additional step to get direct permission from the parents. So I thought I had checked all the boxes. But there was a box I didn't check. And so because of that, my understanding is that's what they explained to me. They said, well, you didn't ask him. So we don't trust. So we've decided, they made it very clear, we have decided we want to part ways, because we don't trust you not to upload. I said, and I could tell there was the conversation was over. They had, before I even walked in the room, they knew what they wanted. So it didn't matter what I said. Yeah. And she said, you could leave now. You can agree to separate now, or we could, do an investigation. And I thought, what's there to investigate? I either talked to him, or I either got his permission, or I didn't. But I said, I really like this job. So is there any way we could, I was thinking this seems a little extreme of a reaction. It definitely took me off guard. I was thinking, yeah, sure. Have you spoken to the students' parents? To see, well, no, we haven't checked with them yet, but we believe you. I said, well, then let's
maybe that'd be part of the investigation.
Yeah. And so I asked her that, and they which I probably should. They didn't really tell me what any of that means anyway. So yeah, they put me on leave, and then 3 days later, they officially fired me, I guess.
And in this, they took a computer that had been allocated to you.
Yeah, I just had to turn over everything and leave.
Would you talk about the book you lost? Because I know you were writing.
I was able to get it back to.
Really?
I give them credit for that. Credit where credit's due. Now, this is speculation. Had I not posted that video to X, sharing this information, that I had lost my job, maybe there wouldn't have been enough. My guess is they probably wouldn't have bothered. From what I've seen with them, if they don't really care, they just want the outcome that they can make that outcome happen. It doesn't matter what happens, as long as it's not breaking any rules and it's technically allowed. The morality doesn't seem to really enter into leadership's mind. So, but anyways, they did. It was really interesting because they, within the clause, they claimed I had a microphone that belonged to them and a light. Well, remember I told you we'd set up that studio.
Mm-hmm.
Me and the other teacher. We made sure that we were using our personal equipment. And for years, he and I the school didn't have much gear. I had built out this program. So I was using my own camera, and his light and we slowly started purchasing equipment. Now, at one point he lost a light. He had another light stolen, and we were able to order a light to replace that. Anyways, at one point I had a light in North Carolina. I would even have over the summer, because there would be sometimes summer things going on, and people in the building, we would store the equipment like at his house and my house. And I had a light that was in my car, and I drove down to North Carolina like I'm doing right now. Every summer I spend over a month in North Carolina working on my family farm and dealing with all the family stuff I got to do. And I had a light, and I forgot it in North Carolina a year ago, and I was just going to get it next time I went down. The only person that even knew about that or cared, because I managed all this myself, they didn't even know they owned the light, was this other teacher. So in that email they're like, we'll give you the thumb drive with your improperly stored data. So yet you improperly stored information on your computer. This book you were writing, improper. We'll give it back to you if you will, but you're going to need to return this microphone, our microphone that you have, and this light that you have. And the only person that even knew about that light would have been the other teacher. And I thought, and also that he assured me that microphone belonged to him. I'm getting into the weeds here, but it's just, this is the kind of stuff where they just make your life hell. It's like, is this really necessary? And
just being super pedantic for no reason.
And I knew that he wasn't going to continue with the YouTube channel. And after I posted that video on X, he had messaged me, hey, can I come over Friday and pick up all my gear? And he did. It was just such a strange interaction. It was like a different person. He was like, I'm not going to continue with the channel. I said, okay, that's understandable. Because he could be fired at any time, and he has a kid and a wife. And I said, no, it's understandable. How's it going at school and everything? And what'd you think of the video that I posted? And he said, well, I thought it was dishonest. In what way?
Yeah, what part?
Well, you knew you had to ask that principal. Dude, how many I told you I uploaded the video and that I'd gotten parental permission 8 days before they fired me. You never said a word. And we'd been in my house filming. How many conversations do we have trying to navigate all this? So yes, you're right and he said, well, you said no one gave you guidance. I said, you're right. You and I, other than you helping me, you and I were trying to navigate all this. Other than you, no one did. So I didn't count you in that. I didn't want to say, except this guy, no one ever gave me, I didn't want to drag you into this, but I thought, fair enough. But other than that, and he goes, I told you they were looking for any reason to fire you. I told you to be careful. I said, you're right. You did tell me to be careful. And I told you I'd gotten parental permission. Anyways, I was like, it was just, he kept saying things like that. And then he was saying, I was like, yeah, they asked me to sign this NDA and I can't sign it. And you know why, because this, and this. All the conversations we've had over the past several years, all the frustration you and I share, the times you thought you were going to get fired, it was like none of that happened. And I think it was so strange. I when he left, I thought, was he recording me? That was very strange.
Oh, like the conversation felt like stilted, almost like a wire situation.
It was like he was recording on his phone or something. And then the next day is when I got that email claiming I had their microphone. And here's the thing. As he was walking out, he has a little audio adapter that allows me to plug a mic into a computer. I said, could I buy that off you? So all this gear had been sitting in my house for 4 months. He wasn't using it. He just handed it to me. I think part of him did feel bad. So I thought at the moment, he's telling himself this stuff to make it easier to walk away. We were best friends.
Yeah.
I thought that's what, and it might have been that. I'm speculating. So he handed the adapter to me, and he was holding that microphone, and he put it down and left it. I thought, oh, he's going to leave the mic for me to use. I even said to him, I was like, yeah, you can always pick it up later. Didn't say a word. He just walked out. And then he said, see ya. Didn't make eye contact or anything. No goodbye, nothing. And then I get the email the next day, or actually that was on a Friday. I got it on Monday, the next business day, claiming I had their microphone. And he was the only one that knew I even had forgotten that light in North Carolina. So I had to pay for the light, the microphone. But anyways, that what makes me feel like critical thinking, logically, there's a high likelihood. I don't know for sure, but that was a strange feeling.
I think you're probably right on when you say that because some of it too, the way you've described it, it sounds like these are probably some of what he said were the conversations he had with
someone had sat him down.
Yeah. And then he's repeating those talking points.
He was saying, when I talked about the NDA, he was saying, well, that's standard procedure. And I was thinking, what the hell do you know about the standard procedure around the NDAs when someone gets fired?
Also at a school, I wouldn't have, maybe that is, I don't know, but I wouldn't have thought.
Someone had clearly put this in his head that this is, well, that's standard procedure. Well, that's standard procedure. Every single point, every single problematic thing I had experienced in that day of being fired, the whole experience, well, that's just standard procedure. It shows kind of how people can switch their mind. They can genuinely change what they believe to fit the narrative, which is how ideology works.
Well, these people successfully staged a coup, so I imagine it's pretty intimidating.
Theoretically,
theoretically staged a coup.
Yeah, the reason they gave, I think, was something around the lines of the principal and assistant principal didn't create a safe environment, which is so broad, but there were teachers that quit over that. They were so frustrated. It was a war going on, man, behind the scenes. It was strange. And there's so many strange things like that have happened at the school. I think that's one of the reasons they really pushed for me they really wanted that NDA signed. But I have no interest in talking about the school and naming them. This is the only time I've ever even spoken about the whole coup thing.
Let me just ask, is this a public school?
I'm not going to, I don't want to reveal anything that would allow people
that would be, okay. No worries. Well, let me think. Because, I want to talk about the lost novel, but it's not lost. So I imagine you want to.
I was working on a book. That's fine. No, I was working on the Secret Scholar Society as a movie and a novel. Then I was asked to write. A publisher or an agent reached out to me because I was now this is an example of how one viral video, suddenly you have perceived value, but it's not real unless you can actually build something. They asked me to write a book on critical thinking. And so I was working on that, and I still am. And one day I hope to publish that. Okay. If I can actually offer, I'm not just going to do the cliched. If I can offer something unique, then I will,
What would you consider the cliche of critical thinking to be? And then what would be the more
down the Socratic method, being nice to people, just the surface level observations that I don't know why you would really, some people might find it interesting, but I don't know if that's worth writing.
When you say Socratic method, do you just mean asking questions?
The Socratic method comes from the idea, Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. None of us are as smart as we think we are. Question everything, going layer by layer, peeling the onion back. Now, people I think it's true. I mean, that what happened in that video was the Socratic method. I wasn't consciously engaging in it, but it's just highly effective. Socrates didn't invent the Socratic method the same way an archaeologist uncovers an artifact or a mathematician creates a mathematical breakthrough. They didn't invent the breakthrough. It already existed. They discovered something already there and gave it a name so that it could be articulated.
And he was very well known in the dialogues for utilizing it, so it got named after him, basically.
Right. He was, yeah, that was his trademark.
I find it funny, though, to say that people think the Socratic method is being nice to people, because I guess he was, but they also killed him for it. So, because he would poke holes in people's beliefs.
Yeah. Asking why is how I would summarize the Socratic method in its most simple form.
So do you think people misunderstand it now?
No, I don't think they misunderstand it. I think there might be a misunderstanding around, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a misunderstanding.
Okay.
You know, but that's why I wouldn't make an interesting book, because it's already been done.
So then anyway, how would you take it deeper then?
I think it all ties into the elusive intangible, which is why I start with the drawing the boats on the surface. Words are just, because there's a lot of people that care so much about the semantics rather than what the words are. The words aren't the end all be all. So for example, like when I was a grad student and I was pitching a thesis project for a documentary, there was this one professor taught documentary, because he's teaching this area of study, the terminology really matters. And he wanted to know, well, is this cinema verite? Is this blah, 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 blah? And I just said, that's just jargon. It doesn't, you just want to be able to categorize this rather than talk about, you know, what's really important. What are we trying to accomplish here and why? That often happens with language. And so what interests me, so when we were just discussing all the things at the workplace, the strange patterns, coups or whatever, those are the things they're nonverbal. No one is going to say we're staging a coup because we don't like so-and-so, but their behavior and their decisions and their actions communicate that. And that's the thing. Those are the things that I think are really, those are the patterns that are interesting and most useful. But people often don't talk about those patterns in a way as though logic can allow you to navigate those patterns. And they occur every day in our lives in so many different forms. So taking critical thinking and logic and being able to apply it to things that are more actually relevant than just the boats on the surface.
Interesting.
Something
okay,
like
so it's taking the rational into, I guess, not entirely the realm of the emotional, but what is considered that.
Well,
that's the below the surface.
I mean, and again, I've been thinking about this stuff nonstop for like the last 5 months. And when I first started, and it's absolutely essential to be able to parse out the subjective from the objective. And because if someone just says, well, I don't like Donald Trump because I don't like his personality, or he's just a meanie. Well, you can't really contend with that logically very deeply. You can, but at the same time, we can't discount subjectivity completely, because there are things that cannot be articulated logically, whether it's a belief in God or what God means, or the fact that there's certain things like instinct, where if I'm talking to a coworker, my boss is asking me to do something and something doesn't feel right. I'm not quite sure what it is, but that part of us, that thing we call our gut, and it often is right. How? And we can't articulate it. So we can't discount that. And I call that the elusive intangible.
Okay.
Or why a certain movie resonates, another one doesn't. Why is Heath Ledger a better Joker than blah, blah, blah? You know, it's art. That's what art is. And it's existed thousands of years for that reason. Art is the exploration of the elusive intangible, that which cannot be articulated. They're trying to figure out how to articulate it in other forms. So if you can merge the two, then you can actually get something done.
Well, do you believe then that art is objective in any sense, or that it's all subjective, or somewhere in between?
It's in between. It's the merging of the two.
Can you explain that more? Because I actually have a friend who I've had huge debates with over this, because I think I've taken the idea that there is objective art, and he takes the complete opposite. But this is a new idea to me that it's both.
There are some, Rings of Power or a Star Wars, one of the recent Star Wars movies. There are some movies that I think I can logically, objectively articulate reasons why they're just poorly done, because they broke this rule of storytelling, or they completely they ignored the reality of archetypes or something along those lines. They upended the hero's journey. Like, they took Luke Skywalker and made him a bitter old man who threw away his lightsaber and expect us to care. Well, it goes against the very fabric of reality on a deep level. Something like, I don't know, this is an interesting question, so I'm just kind of like exploring it off the top of my head, but it would be something like that, where, okay, there's some things we can logically dig into, but then again, I can't explain why Heath Ledger could do what he did. There's some things I could logically say about that, but there's some things I can't. So I think it's both.
Yeah, I guess it does get tricky there, because you could state something that's more of an opinion, and then that's where people will say, well, that's subjective. And it's like, so, but I think you're right. It's like, I don't think anyone would deny that Heath Ledger put in, like, what you were talking about, the elusive intangible, something about that performance resonates so much more than even the cartoony ones we love from before him.
Yeah.
Would you say Joaquin Phoenix is touching on that?
I think he's a good actor. I think he's dancing with it, exploring it. I prefer Heath Ledger. I just think there's something elusive and intangible about Heath Ledger that isn't there for me in Joaquin Phoenix, and that's a subjective statement.
So then how does it come back to the objective then? How would you weigh them? Or can you? Is it even worth having that conversation?
You could take a survey. Who is the best Joker? What do you think? Who do you think's going to win? Is that data? Well, the audience, in the same way, when I said I can't go just because of a viral video, that doesn't mean I can, because the audience knows if you didn't earn it or not. But there's no way for me to logically explain why. But could we say that the audience is a data point? The audience doesn't lie, almost?
Yeah, well, that's hard. Okay. So there was this post, since it's Father's Day. Shout out to the fathers. There was this post on one of those big meme pages that apparently all week they'd been doing this, like, what do you call them in sports, where they put people against each other and you eventually get to the best, but you let everyone vote, like it's a bracket. Yeah. And they'd done that with fathers in movies, and all of the actually good fathers got kicked out in the first round. And it came down to like Tony Stark and Peter Griffin or something ridiculous. And the top four were all bad. It was like, I was like, okay, I was surprised that they had Liam Neeson from Taken in there, and he didn't win at all. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure at the end of that one, it just came down to popularity.
But what was the frame of the contest? What were they?
Who was the greatest dad from a movie or TV show?
That's pretty broad, though. So
yeah,
I get your point. But if we were,
Walter White was in there, and I'm like, he destroyed his family.
You're asking a specific question, kind of, and people are going to almost be ironic, and I think it's different rather than a movie star is a movie star because the audience perceives them as a movie star. So if the audience perceives Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., which they do, I think, is that true? Is that objectively true? Because he's only a movie star because people perceive him as that.
I guess, we'd have to define our terms there, because I guess movie star, there's the classic movie star, like where we don't know anything about them and they don't do interviews, and there's not many of them left. And I would put, personally, I think Dennis Quaid is one of those people for me. And he just proved it because he went on a bunch of podcasts for this new movie he's promoting. And he said the exact same talking points on every single podcast.
I hate that.
I hate it too, but it does prove he's from that era where it's like, oh, I do my junkets. I do my, I say what I want to say about the movie, and any other question he just kind of ignores.
Yeah, I shouldn't say I hate that, because
it has its purpose, but I'd prefer open conversation.
He's cool. I like him.
Yeah.
I saw some of his interviews. That was cool. But because it is interesting question to think about, though, because like the only reason that actor has value, the only value they have is what the audience gives them.
True.
They're making that money because the audience will reflect. That's reality. The audience will pay that or they won't. The movies will succeed or they won't. That's a real
obvious
data point, but we can't articulate it.
And I think that also leads to a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it postmodern per se, but like the arguments people have now about like, why aren't people getting paid the same? Or they're trying to find a objective reason for why it's like, oh, it's because of sex. It's like, I would say that there's a reason Robert Downey Jr. got paid so much to be Iron Man.
But you can point to the income the movie made, and that offsets the budget. There's data there. So yeah, I agree. I see what you mean, but I don't think acknowledging that there's subjective, there are things that can't be articulated. I don't think that is an argument for postmodernism.
Okay. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, let's think about that. It's similar to what I was just saying about, we have actual data of why Robert Downey Jr. got paid that. You might not find it fair. It's not equitable or equal. It's not fair. It's ludicrous. It's also ludicrous that anyone wants to sit down with me because of a video that's ludicrous. And when Piers Morgan has me on his show, the only reason he's doing that is because of perceived value. I'm the same person I was. No one gave a crap about what I had to say a week before I talked to Piers Morgan.
So then why, well, I guess a question would be, do you think postmodernism is legitimate, or why not then? Because I do think we're living in a postmodern era right now.
I would say, yeah. Oh, I agree, but that doesn't make it right. That's why it's so powerful, is because there's so much of it is true. Things are unfair. Like, it's not fair that Robert Downey Jr. makes what he makes. But what's the alternative? Not have a competitive marketplace where people's value is reflected by what people are willing to pay, or a product is worth what people are willing to pay? What's the alternative? Someone gets to set the price of that value. Someone gets to say, nope, I'm going to determine what Robert Downey Jr. is going to get paid because that's not fair and this is more fair.
But then I feel like that's where they fall on themselves a bit, because it's like, well, who's that person and who gets to decide they get to be that person?
And that's the danger of it. In the same way with freedom of speech, the moment you say, well, some speech needs to be policed, okay, who's going to be making those decisions? That's the slippery slope of it. And yes, it's not a perfect system and there's flaws, but just because there are flaws doesn't mean you have a better alternative. There's always going to be flaws. Churchill said it best. This is the most useful quote. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others.
Exactly. Well, because we don't technically live in a democracy in the United States.
People have made that point to me when I use that. Yes, and that would make for an interesting conversation. And I haven't thought that through enough to be able to.
Neither have I.
The republic.
Constitutional republic.
Constitutional republic.
But I literally remember asking my teacher what the difference was in high school, and he said there isn't one, and that can't be true.
Yeah, there probably is a difference. I'd have to look into it more.
Same, but I do wonder, because it's like ultimately though it's fairly democratic. We pick our representatives.
You do pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's like Peterson once said, "The machine's on fire, but it still functions." So that's one way to look at it. It's like right now, because there's so many countries that are so worse off than us, even as everyone says they're feeling the decline right now. And even I feel the decline. It feels like we're kind of maybe not going like straight down, but we're going like this.
And perhaps that's necessary growing pain. I don't know. No one can know. But until looking back from the future, they will be able to judge it. But one thing is for sure, I think I'm confident saying that America is the most successful experiment of its kind in the history of the human race.
I feel like that's an objective statement. Like
it is. It's an objective statement.
It's just like name one other civilization that did better in one.
You're right. That's another example of where those two merge, because we actually have things that we could point to. I was just thinking, well, wait a minute. What about like Greece and everything? But also look at the atrocious thing. Like Socrates was murdered for this. It's
exactly
a lot of bad. We have it better. That doesn't mean things won't end. but I think we objectively do have it better than any point in history.
I kind of want to go back now because you were talking so much about film and filmmaking and stuff, and I know you've made videos about how production works. One, why don't you tell us, how did you get into teaching from where you started as filmmaking? And it's interesting that those have kind of come back around. And then I kind of want to get into like what Hollywood is really doing at the moment.
Yeah. I just wanted to make movies as a kid. And yes, my favorite actor was Heath Ledger, as you could probably tell. I wanted to do small indies like what he was doing. That was before Dark Knight. Yeah, he wasn't, I mean, he was big, but he wasn't like he was right before his death. But anyway, so I went first year of college, UNC Wilmington, just because they had a film program. It was near my house. My friends were going there and it could allow me to study film. 2 years in, I transferred to a real film school, one of the top 10 ones that happened to be in the state. So I got in-state tuition, and that was a great experience. I actually learned things at that school. And that was before I didn't see any of I saw things were not as problematic in higher ed as they used. Once grad school came around, things had changed. So that's where I have two pretty objective measurements. So after undergrad, I did the LA thing, Hollywood, lived in Hollywood or in LA for over 2 years, worked about a year as an assistant to a literary agent in Beverly Hills right on Wilshire Boulevard, and got that experience, with the headset on, listening to all the calls, fielding the calls. Learn a lot about that. You learn a lot about human nature. And
was this the person you've spoken about before who was kind of a nightmare, or was this before her?
Oh, that was a talent manager. They were both a little bit of nightmares, but that's pretty common in Hollywood. No, she was worse. She was in Manhattan. I did an internship for a summer in Manhattan, undergrad. Before
okay.
She was uniquely strange. Anyways, did that in LA, and no, I still learned a lot from him. He wasn't as much a nightmare. No, I can understand everything that happened with him. With her, I couldn't understand the motivations. That's when things get weird, is when people are just, you're punishing someone for arriving 15 minutes early.
Why don't you tell me that story?
I was staying in NYU dorm. There was no AC because it was broken, on 9th and Broadway. And her house was on the upper west side. And I was supposed to meet her for that day. I would go in her apartment with my computer, and gosh, she couldn't do anything. I don't know how she made a living. She couldn't edit. She couldn't make spread. Anyway, so I'd be editing reels, and she wanted me to come to her apartment. And I got there. I'd always been taught by my professors in the film industry, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So I got there 15 minutes early, and I was sitting in the lobby just waiting 15 minutes early. And she got really upset that she said, I asked you to come at like 2:00, not 1:45, 2:00. That's a small thing, I guess, but it indicates the kind of person you're dealing with. So other things like that happened. I can't really recall all of them. I just remember it being an awful experience. And it was all unpaid. I didn't make $1 either. I traveled to New York to live in this dorm with no AC, to work for her for free. And you're going to treat the person working for free for you like that? That says a lot about your character, but there's a lot of people out there like that.
And this was before you went to LA?
Yeah.
So would you say LA was overall a better experience than Manhattan?
Yeah. I don't like LA. I would, if I had to choose between the two, I would take New York. If I had to live in one of the two, I would rather live in Manhattan. That doesn't mean I want to live in Manhattan, but yes, I learned a lot though. And it was cool in LA, being in that location.
Yeah, Wilshire's right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it was right. We were right like a block from Gersh Talent Agency, and it's all right there. But I knew I didn't want to settle down out west. And I knew it was kind of like, the more I put this off, I kind of got a face the piper, pay the piper, and face the unknown, and acknowledge that I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to go figure it out. And so I wanted to get away from the business side of it, where when you're just sitting there on an agent, all they do is sit in their office, make phone calls and emails on behalf of the people that are working creatively. As someone who's more creative, like I told you at the beginning, I wanted to go in and make little indies. You couldn't get much farther. So I realized and there's other reasons for how that trajectory happened in that journey. But so anyways, I drove back east and started working. I was like, I'm going to go try and make my living with a camera as a freelance videographer, just to make myself get back to working with the camera. And I liked the idea of autonomy and not being dependent on large crews and budgets. And it's a nightmare dream that we can talk about that, but so I did that for a while. And then eventually that led me to grad school. And that's how I moved to Boston, 2016. Was there for 3 years, started teaching as a grad student. And then they asked me to develop, was a year once I graduated, I think I had the chance to develop like any course I wanted. It would be like, so I could design the film class I wanted to teach.
Oh, so this undergrad was how you became a teacher?
Yeah. This is grad school. Grad school is how I became a teacher.
Oh, so what prompted the choice?
Well, when I was in the unknown, working as a freelance videographer, I was thinking, how can I make a living on the East Coast in one of these areas I would like to live? Well, grad school that would be an awesome thing. Yes, I might go into some debt. Let's see if I can get a scholarship. I was able to get a half ride. And this will allow me to, it's like a second chance, kind of a second win to find your direction again. And I thought, well, given how difficult it is working in the film industry, where you're going gig to gig, it's a gig economy, project to project, you'll be unemployed for months, but it's not much certainty. It's a tough way to make a living. I was like, what's a good alternative? Teaching filmmaking as a professor, and then I can still do it on my own, like I want to, on a small scale. Like, maybe
and that's a good place to be, I would feel, as a teacher teaching film, because you also get to play.
Yeah.
So and you're really getting
to encourage that at the college level. Ideally, there's the publish or perish idea, which actually ended up getting me fired, but it's ironic. But
publish and perish.
So I went for it, and had the chance to design the class I wanted to teach, and I thought about it as, okay, this is going to be 5 classes that are 3 hours each. I'm going to treat this as though this is the last film class I'll ever be able to teach. Like, let's say I was going to die after this. What would I say? What would be what is most important? And I want to do it from the very beginning to the end, from the script all the way through production, pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, all the way to the last step. Can I do it in that amount of time? What would be the most important things? Like a crash course almost. It's almost like an anti-film school class, because it's like, you don't need film school. I don't think, like, this is, if you could avoid film school and just do one class, that's kind of how I was. And that sounds pretty pretentious, like as though I can do more than, but I think
I don't think you're wrong. I'll say, I never, because I went to film school. I was also in LA for 3.5 years. And I never made it into like on any major Hollywood sets or anything, but I worked almost adjacent to Hollywood, which was in the B-rate monster movies, stuff like that. I even built a scale model that we blew up for a movie. That was amazing. But I took a week off school whenever I would get those gigs. And I learned so much more on sets, even not getting paid, even working 14-hour days. They did pay. It was like $500 for a week of work. That's abysmal, but it was worth it. And I learned so much more. I would come back to the school and I would see what we were doing in cinematography class. And I'd be like, oh, do this, do that, and it wasn't that it was just, there's such a difference between hands-on experience where you actually have a product at the end of it versus just instruction. And it's like, I would agree with you in that. I don't think it's pretentious to say that actually doing it versus just being told about it. Because like the most useless class I ever took was production, like how to be a producer. I don't know if I just had a bad teacher but we would literally, most of us would walk out of the class and show each other blank notes because we'd be like, what was the takeaway?
Yeah, they don't teach the things that I should be taught in a class about producing. How do you take the screenplay, break it down, turn it into a budget and a schedule? Where they used to, in undergrad, I was in the producing program. There was different programs like cinematography. You had to choose one and really dive into it. And they expected us to be able to hand us a screenplay. And I had to tell them, this is how much I can make this for, and actually show the budget for every department, detailed budget. Yeah, that would be the pitch, right? I can make this for this amount. And this is what I would shoot on. This is how many weeks it will take me to make it. These are the scenes I will shoot on what day. But also students should be learning how to avoid the traps of distribution. To cap your expenses on your distribution agreement. What do these distribution agreements look like? What are the common negotiating tricks you're going to run into? What are the drawbacks of festivals? How do you avoid the plethora of fake festivals that are out there ripping people off? No one teaches those things that unless you're in something like what I did in undergrad, where that's all you're studying for the last 2 years with people that have done all that. But often film schools, if you're doing like what you were describing, often they'll just won't talk about any of that. So often when I'm doing this with students, their eyes light up about it because it's like no one else talks about the stuff and it's actually useful.
Yeah, I can't say I ever remember learning about budgets, though. To be fair to my school, I wasn't on the producer track. But we did have to take a production class. So it was the introductory class, but I still feel like,
yeah, but you could do that in a day in a class.
Exactly.
I could do that in one class with you. You would know how to budget and schedule. Yeah. And it correlates directly to screenwriting. You have to understand why formatting is the way it is. Because if you understand why you're formatting from the perspective of a producer, it's going to make you a better writer because it all ties together into one ecosystem. In the same way, critical thinking and logic all ties together. It's what yeah.
How do you feel about the unions in Hollywood right now?
I think they're awful. Unions in general are illogical. They're just a logical fallacy. And I think logic is the thing that is the best tool we have into revealing why they're so bad. We've been seeing it in Hollywood, where unions are driving up the cost of production. When you drive it, it's basic economics. It should be. And I do think Milton Friedman is right about unions, where it's protecting you drive up the cost of production. That's going to decrease the number of jobs. Milton Friedman is correct that unions protect like the top, let's say 20%, let's be generous, 20% of people that are already the top 20%. They go on strike, they get better negotiation deals, but the end result, when you drive up cost of production, the number of jobs decrease. That's hurting the ones that the bottom 80%. Who are struggling to find that the top 20% were already the top 20%.
Yeah.
They're out there picketing for their own demise. And they don't even know it because they're being sold a story. They get caught up in a story because human beings make sense of the world through stories. In the same way that colleague of mine came over and had to tell himself a story and it changed who he was. It's a powerful tool.
How do you feel? I forget if this went through or not, but I saw that the last writer's strike had something to do with making it non-gig work or something.
How would we make it non-gig work though? Oh, well, I think
I'm not sure if I understood it, but I don't know if anyone did.
There's a clause in there where it's I don't remember the number. If it's 2 of the writers, the mandated like 8 to 10 or whatever the number is, 2 of them have to be given an assistant position as a co-producer, so that's supposed to lead them on to a career trajectory to make them a producer. But the problem is you can't artificially create these things. You can't artificially affect people's trajectories. You have to leave them to their own devices. And that's what unions do. They take the end result and they cram it down on the process. The same way DEI does. In the same way that supervisor at the school that fired me takes the end result she wants, and to hell with the natural process that would occur otherwise. As long as I get the outcome I want. And that's a destructive way of doing things. And then the only option you have is NDAs to cover your tracks.
Yeah, so no one can talk about it. Then we can claim deniability. Why do you think it seems like in every direction anyone looks right now, it seems that people are pushing for equal outcome.
Because who wouldn't want an equal outcome?
Anyone who understands that you can progress and get better at things and have a better shot at reaching the highest echelons if you merit it.
Yep. But
is it just that people are like saying, I won't merit it, I give up, but I want what they like? I don't know. I can't understand that mentality. So that's why I'm asking.
In the same way, I can't understand the mentality of someone picketing in a union on strike, refusing. They're actually hurting their ability to. They're saying, I'm going to make it so I can't get a job. I'm losing money so that I can picket and do this because they think that they can achieve they can just force through the outcome they want. And so. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make sense. But so my response would be, well, who wouldn't want to make more money? Because that's where the motivation's coming from. Who doesn't want more pay? When they go on strike, they're going on strike though to get higher wages. Well, no, of course you want higher wages, but at what expense?
Yeah, and then is it going to be a manufactured system where people are handed higher wages, or is it? It's sort of like where people always misunderstand the issue with minimum wage. It's like you set a minimum wage, that's all the companies will ever pay. So it's like, well, what do you expect? It's not going to be a good outcome.
There's so many ramifications for setting a higher minimum wage that people don't consider. Okay, the kids that would have been working, doing these jobs part-time. Well, it's the same thing as the unions. You drive up the cost of production. McDonald's is now it's more expensive for them. They can't afford to hire those kids now. So then those kids aren't going to get those positions, and then that affects their entire experience, life trajectory.
There's also a funny thing with fast food specifically, where it's like I don't understand why people think you should be able to have a job in fast food if you're not like a manager or overseeing multiple locations. And then that's a job you're supposed to be able to have like a family and a house and 2 cars off of. You work in fast food. It's a starter job. Like I worked at a pharmacy as my first job for $12 an hour selling the candy bars to people. I shouldn't be able to buy a house on that. It's a starter job.
Let's look at Italy. When you go to Italy, which I spent extensive time in Italy, and they would say you are very wrong. And they would, because in Italy, people working at McDonald's are doing that for careers in grocery stores. And they do it proudly. Well, I don't know if that's the right word, but they are fine doing it for their entire lives. And in Italian law makes it, they protect the employees to such an extent that it makes it extremely difficult to fire someone. What is the end result? Well, when you go into a restaurant and someone's waiting on, they don't give a crap. They're like, you're impeding on me. The service, the very motivation to do your job correctly goes out the window, and you can feel it. They're acting as though you're an inconvenience for being there and giving them your money because they don't need it. Italian, and my mom teaches a study abroad program in Italy, and she raves about the Italian healthcare system, but at what expense? The very fabric of Italian society is altered by these dynamics. And then what's the result? Well, we see the new leadership that's been brought in is extremely conservative, is willing to speak out against some of these things, and hopefully they can turn it around. But that's an example, though, of when you say what you're taking the natural people left to their own devices, make the judgment that this is a starter job. You don't want to do this your whole life. Aspire to more. Or you could take the alternative and say, well, we're going to impose a different set of values that's not the natural set that would occur probably in like a free country, Anyways, yeah. I'm ranting.
No, it's a good rant. I think it's important because it's like all of that, it all circles back into the whole postmodern idea too. It's like when everything's just conceptual and abstract, anything goes, and bad ideas get just as much credence as good ideas, even proven good ideas. And then we just keep cycling.
So good. It's like, so you can work in a grocery store and make a livable wage and do that your entire life. God, that sounds so great. Who could possibly argue against that? But it does have larger ramifications.
Man, I don't think it sounds great at all. I was very briefly the guy who would go outside and push the carts around and bring them back. And even that was horrible. Like I couldn't imagine wanting to be having a comfortable living doing that. I think part of the reason you get paid so little in the US for jobs like that is like, yeah, aspire for more. try to make it to management if you really want to work in that world.
Quick example. Yesterday, when I was driving down here, I stopped at a McDonald's and they said hiring now. And they were advertising it as a stepping point to your next career, not your next career. I noticed that. This is such a coincidence that we're talking about this now. I was standing there in line and I actually thought about it. I thought, that's really interesting. They're not saying here, why not say hiring, join our team at McDonald's, your next career. No, it's like, this is a stepping stone to build your next career, saying it proudly.
Strangely, one of the best places I've ever worked was this chain of car washes in Indiana called Crew. And they had that mentality, but they were also incredibly strict in how you worked there. You couldn't have tattoos that were visible. You had to shave. And that was the only time I've ever been like clean shaven until they lowered the rule. So you could just do like I think it was like a 1/4 inch. They wanted you to look a very specific way. We basically wore suits, even though it was a car wash. And it was either horrible weather, like in the winter, or sweltering heat. But there was something about it, and they're incredibly successful because it's like, hey, we're presenting an image of success. And I remember they would always encourage the people who worked there to go find your next thing. Or if they're going to college, they would be like, we want you to go to college. We want you to get a great degree. Can we convince you to do a business one so you can come back to us and maybe be higher up? And I just remember that because I don't know of a lot of companies that do that anymore. It seems everything's very lax everywhere I go. And almost to your point, where even in America, I see a lot of employees just treat everybody just like, why are you here?
Yeah, more so in Italy. It's very strange.
I don't know as much about Italy. I guess you would, because you said your mother works there.
Yeah, and I did study abroad there before she even was working there. So it's just an example because I've spent time there. I'm sure it occurs in other places. It was when you were describing that, though, it just popped out because I've had those experiences where I thought about that. It's very clear when you're over there.
Well, I guess because I know we're getting close to an hour and a half here, and you've been so generous with your time. Let me ask as a closing bit, how would you say you look back on where you started, where your road is twisted and turned, and then where you want to go? Like, I guess I'm just asking a weird, broad question about life and how everything progresses, and how you even come to terms with like, this is what I want to do, and how I'm going to get there.
Well, I've been fascinated by this space, people on the space, similar to that you work with. You know the space better than anyone. And I was 2016 on, that changed my life, everything in 2016. And I watch more of this kind of stuff than I do anything. It's fascinating to me. So something like this, it's crazy when you have an opportunity like that, and I was faced with that choice of, do I try and build something with this? And I have so far to go, so much to build, because a viral video is not enough, but I've been doing my best. And then something happens that it's important for me that, and this is, I think I need to figure this into, if I'm going to teach about critical thinking or discuss it, this has to be a big part of it, is the pursuit of truth and living in a way that you're not afraid of the truth. Or if you're thinking suddenly, and this is, I guess, a metaphor for suddenly going viral. Suddenly, if 1 million people were to see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, would that be a good thing or a negative? Would I be scared? Would I want someone to sign an NDA, or would I be ashamed? So if you can live in a way that you're trying your best and you're proud of that and you're able to articulate that, so then even in the workplace, when someone does try and exert power over you or call you out in a way, or it makes it very difficult for them to do so. It's almost like you have truth on your side and all you have to do is clearly state the truth. It has a remarkable effect. It's like a protection mechanism. It's gotten me through so much that, and I'm not perfect, but I strive to do that. Definitely not perfect. So I'm going through a strange time, but my hope is that if I continue to do that, I'll make it through to the other end and things will be better for it. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. People ask me what's going to happen or what do you want to do? And I'm just going to try and do the best and see what comes. So I wish I had a better answer to that, but
no, that's a great answer. And you mentioned Peterson earlier. It's another one of his core tenets that you go for the reality of truth, not the perception of it. And I think you're absolutely right. That's
and that
probably
goes back.
something.
Cool. I just make this one point because this goes back to the beginning of the conversation. The boats and the beneath the surface. The boats are just the words. That's not what's real. Anyone could talk is cheap. Anyone can say anything, but your actions speak louder than words, and that it all ties together and it all comes back in the end.
I love that, as did our podcast.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, this was cool. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're doing this podcast and good luck with it. I think you're going to do great.
Thank you.
Cool.